Today we worked on 4.6, division in the distributive property. Now, with this lesson, we realize how incredibly important it is that we know our multiplication facts in order for us to be able to divide effectively. Let's take a look at some of the problems that you'll work on your homework tonight and work through using the distributive property to help us with dividing. All right, 81 divided by 3. What we need to do when we're dividing is think about multiplication. We have to think about the numbers that we have in front of us. Now, just like on the first lesson when we were working on division, when we're dividing, we can't go over the number that we're working with. We can't go over our dividend. We have to stay underneath it in order for us to get our quotient. So, with partial quotients in the distributive property, we're breaking this number, 81, up into pieces that make it easier for us to divide. We have to think about multiplication, we have to think about division, we got to process all of this stuff all at once. So, let's think about the number 8. This number has a value of 80. And we're thinking about 3. Okay? In your mind, 3 and 8. You have to think, does 3 go into 8 evenly? It does not. So, then I have to think, okay, what's close? 3 times something gets me close to 80. All right, well, 3 times 1 gets me 3. 3 times 2 is 6. So I'm going to think about my tens. 3 times 10 is 30. 3 times 20 is 60. And 3 times 30 is 90. Well, 90 is too much. So I'm going to think 3 times 20, and I get 60. So I'm going to break 81 up. And I'm going to say 60 divided by 3. That's my first part. Now, in order to get my next part, I'm going to have to subtract. So I have my dividend of 81, and I'm going to subtract this piece that I just pulled away from it. I pulled 60 out of that 81. When I subtract, I get 21. All right, that's the next piece that I'm working with. Okay, so I know that 3 goes into 60 evenly. Then I'm going to look at 21. Do I know a fact with 3 going into 21 and getting an answer? I know that 3 times 7 gets me 21. Okay, that's one of my multiplication facts that I know. So I'm going to write 21 divided by 3. Now, what's really important when we're using this strategy is that the numbers that we pull out, 60, 21, that they add up to our dividend. Super duper important that these numbers here add up to what we're starting with. So now we can divide, and we're going to get pieces. We're going to get our partial quotient. So 60 divided by 3 gives me 20. And 21 divided by 3 gets me 7. And in order to get my final quotient, I have to add those pieces together. And so my final quotient is 27. Okay, let's take a look at the next problem. We have 232 divided by 4. All right. Again, let me think about multiplication. I'm going to look at this 2 right here, and the value of this 2 is 200. So in my brain I'm thinking, okay, does 4 go into 200 evenly? Well, I know that 4 goes into 20 evenly, and 200 just another 0 after 20. So 200 divided by 4. And I can focus on this 20 right here in order to get my answer. All right, so I'm down 200 now. 232 minus 200. I'm left with 32. Does 4 go into 32 evenly? It certainly does. All right. Now, again, I'm thinking about multiplication when I'm dividing. So, how many times does 4 go into 20? Well, it goes in 5 times, and I'm left with 1 0. Then, how many times does 4 go into 32? It goes in 8 times. So my final quotient is 58. Okay, next problem. I have 305 divided by 5. Okay, I'm going to start with my 3. The value of this 3 is 300. I could also extend all the way out to my 30 and say, does 5 go into 30 evenly? It certainly does. So that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to break this apart. I know that this has a value of 300, so that's what I'm working with. Now, when I have 305 minus 300, I have 5 left. Okay, and then I can divide. How many times does 5 go into 300? Well, 5 goes into 36 times, and I have 1 0 left. How many times does 5 go into 5? 1 time. And so my final quotient is 61. Again, I'm breaking the number apart into pieces, finding those individual quotients, those partial quotients, and then I add them all together in order to get my final quotient. Here's another problem. Okay, I'm going to look at the 2, and then I'm going to think about my 6 facts, and this has a value of 200, so I'm thinking about 6. Does 6 go into 200 evenly? No, it doesn't. I'm going to look at its neighbor to make my life a little bit easier and extend what I'm looking for so I have less work to do. And I'm going to think to myself, okay, does 6 go into 24 evenly, or is there a number close to 24 that it goes into? 6 does, in fact, go into 24 evenly. The most important part when you're thinking about this, though, is that you think about the value of your numbers. Because right now, the number that I'm looking at is in the hundreds place. So when I'm thinking about 24, I'm really thinking about 240. So when I break my number apart, I have 240 divided by 6. That's the first piece I'm working with. And then my next piece that I have to work with is the difference. I have to subtract. 246 minus 240, and I'm left with 6. Okay, now I go ahead and divide. 6 goes into 24 4 times, and I have a 0 left over, and 6 goes into 6 1 time. So my final quotient is 41. Now, some of you might have thought a little bit differently than that, and that's okay. Let's take a look at how you could have also approached this problem a little bit different. If you didn't see the 24 there, and all you were doing was looking at this 2, and you were thinking about the value of that 2, and you know that this 2 holds a value of 200, you could think to yourself, what number does 6 go into that's close to 200? Well, you know that 6 goes into 18 evenly, so 180. When you subtract 246 minus 180, you're left with 66. And I know that fact too. I know that 6 goes into 66 11 times. When I work this problem out, I would get 30 here plus 11. I get 41 as my quotient, my final quotient. It doesn't matter how you're breaking this number up. As long as these pieces are adding up to what you're starting with. You could break it up 10 times if it's easier for you. If really the facts that you know are 6 times 10, 6 times 10, you could keep doing that until you get nothing left from your dividend, and you'd still get the same final quotient. You might have more parts, but your final answer will be the same. Let's take a look at another problem. Okay, 477 divided by 9. Now, what we're going to think about is this 47 right here. Does 9 go into 47 or something close to 47? Now, I know my mind facts pretty well, so I know that 9 goes into 45 evenly. So that's what I would start with. But let's say you didn't think about 45, and the only 9 fact you could think about was 9 times 40, and you got 360. You could start there. You could start with 360 divided by 9. Then over here you would have to subtract to see what you had left. Okay, and now you're left with 117, and that's a little strange. So you could think, okay, I'm looking at 9. 9 times 10, oh, that's an easy one. I know that's 90, so I'm going to do that next. And when you subtract this, you're left with 27. And hey, guess what? That's also a fact that I know. 27 divided by 9. Now you have 3 parts to work out. 9 goes into 360 40 times. 9 goes into 90 10 times. And 9 goes into 27 3 times. But guess what? When you add all these up, you get 53. If you started instead with 450 divided by 9, and then you would be left with 27, and you did it this way instead, you get the same answer. The one in green has more steps, but all of my pieces here add up to 477. The one in red has fewer steps, but again, my final quotient is the same. Okay, so use the facts you know. Don't try and stretch yourself more than what you know. Use the facts you know, and it'll work out in the end. Okay, our next one is 224 divided by 7. I'm going to start by looking at this 22 and thinking to myself, is there something that 7 goes into that's close to 22? Well, I know that 7 times 3 gives me 21, so I'm going to start with 210 divided by 7. Then I have to subtract 224 minus 210, and I'm left with 14. And hey, that's a really easy fact that I know. I know that 14 divided by 7. I know that one. When I divide, 7 goes into 210 30 times, because 7 goes into 21 3 times. And 7 goes into 14 2 times. So my answer is 32. But let's say you didn't think about this. Let's say you forgot what 7 times 3 was. You could always start with just 7 times 10. You could backtrack and say, okay, I don't know my 7 facts too well, so I'm going to use what I know. Let's say you wanted to do it that way. That's fine. You can start with 70 divided by 7. What's important is that you go over and you subtract. Okay, so 4 minus 0 is 4, and you have to borrow. And 12 minus 7 is 5. And 1. Okay? Hey, I can take another 70 out of this. Sure, why not? 70 divided by 7. Because I know that fact. That one's an easy one. Okay, I have to go back over here and I have to subtract 70 more. 15 minus 7 is 8. Alright, I still don't know, so I'm just going to do 70 again. I have to go back over and I have to subtract. And now I'm left with 14. Okay, I know that fact. I'm going to change colors just so it doesn't blend in. Alright, now finally I have to go and I have to solve all these pieces. But I made it really easy for myself because I know what 70 divided by 7 is. That's 10. Plus, this one over here is also 10. Plus, this one here is also 10. And finally, that is 2. Now 10 plus 10 plus 10 is 30. Plus 2 more gives me 32. Either way, I get the same answer because all of these pieces here add up to what I started with, my dividend of 224. Use what you know. You might have to do a little bit more subtraction, but that's okay. You're using what you know and you will get the same answer. Okay, 219 divided by 3. Okay, I'm going to start here and I'm going to look at my 21 and I say, okay, I do know that fact. So 210 divided by 3. I know that 3 goes into 210 evenly. So off to the side, I then need to subtract to get my next piece. And I get 9. And I also know this fact. I know that 3 goes into 9 evenly. And then I divide. And then I add. and I get my quotient. Now again, super important